Hey there, welcome to this episode. Today we're talking about the Great Reset. Now, if you've been watching the media over the last sort of 2 to 3 years, particularly with COVID, you've probably started to heard of an organisation called the World Economic Forum. Okay, now the World Economic Forum is a sort of a global economics think tank set up and run by a guy called Klaus Schwab, who's a German academic. He started the World Economic Forum, I think it was back in around 1979. So it's actually been going for quite a long time, although most people are really only familiar with it since it sort of raised its head during the COVID era. And so I want to talk to you a bit about what this organisation is doing and what they sort of believe, if you like, and what as Christians, how we should be thinking about it, and of course, what should we be doing in our lives in light of what these people have in mind. Now, the World Economic Forum, they run an annual event in Davos. It's basically a who's who of politics, celebrities like Leonardo DiCaprio, and you get business titans as well. So it's all these people getting together and rubbing shoulders together and trying to talk about how they're going to make the world a better place. A very dangerous thing when you think of it like that, all these people sort of getting together. And it may sound good to some, but what ultimately this group is about is centralised control. They've made their objectives very clear. As I say, most people weren't aware of them a few years ago, but now it's started to all come out of the woodwork. And it really came out with a video they put out during COVID, which basically said by 2030, you'll own nothing and be happy. That was the main line that most people picked up on. But there's a couple of other big changes as well, such as the fact that America would no longer be the #1 global power. There'll be others involved as well. Democracy would be tested to its limits. All these kind of things where you kind of think, what do you really mean here? What are you really telling us? Well, now, I don't know about you, but most people I know desire to own their own home. If you told the average Australian, where I'm from, that actually no, they're not going to own their own home, in fact someone's going to take it from them, they wouldn't be too happy about it. But what the World Economic Forum really is trying to do is to, as I say, bring around centralised control. And that's their key objective. They believe that the world should be run by this group of smart elites, those who are much smarter than us, the great unwashed, and they want to have complete control over our lives. And there's a number of things that they have in mind here. So one here is centralised control through the financial system. And the way that they plan on doing that is through digital currency. Now, we've already seen the rise of cryptocurrency over the last 10 years, and certainly in the last couple of months, cryptocurrency has plummeted, and there's lots of reasons for that. A lot of it's very speculative, very high risk. To me, it's a very dangerous area. But what is interesting though is the technology that sits behind it. And what the World Economic Forum are working on with central banks to do is to develop digital currency, so a digital US dollar, a digital Australian dollar, etc. And many central banks are already there. They've already gone down this path and are well and truly on that. Others are not quite there yet. And the thing about a digital currency, it may sound good. In fact, some of you think your money in the bank's digital already because you log in through the web page and you can see your money. But the reality is digital currency is quite something else. Digital currency is something that can be programmed. And so in effect, you would end up potentially having an account directly with the central bank. I think they'll decentralise that through the normal banks because they won't want to deal with all the logistics associated with that. But ultimately, you'll be able to have your digital currency. But the thing is, it will be programmable. Okay, so just think about that for a moment. You can program a currency, and that means they can decide what you're allowed to spend it on and what you shouldn't spend it on, and they can control it. And if you don't comply with their way of doing things, they can just turn you off altogether. So that's one of the things they want to do. Of course, they're also climate change obsessed. Now, I know there's lots of different views out there on climate change. I have very strong views about the real issues associated with it. But the point here is they're using climate change as a Trojan horse to bring about huge economic shifts. Some of you will have seen what's going on with the farmers in Holland, where essentially roughly a third of them will go out of business and lose their farms, so lose their business and their livelihood, lose their property, because the Dutch government is absolutely bent on making sure that the gases, nitrogen gases I believe it is, will be significantly reduced, I think up to like 75% or some crazy figure. And so that's going to have an enormously destructive effect. Firstly, it'll reduce the food supply, which of course at the moment we've got a global food crisis, so it's a crazy thing to be doing at this time let alone doing that at all. And it's also extremely harmful. You know, if you believe climate change is real, then you'd have to say, well, why are we doing something like that? Why are we not trying to work on a whole range of new technologies and so forth to solve these problems rather than destroying people's lives and businesses? So this is all about, once again, control. They want property. They want to take over people's property. They want to own everything. You own nothing and you're going to be happy. That's their plan for you. Okay, so that's what you have to understand about what these people are up to. Now, who's involved in this? Well, sadly, many governments, particularly Western governments, have been infiltrated by the World Economic Forum. Certainly in Australia, Greg Hunt, who up until the last election was our federal health minister, worked for the World Economic Forum as their head of strategy at some point before he became a politician. And of course, if you ever listen to Klaus Schwab, he will tell you, there's video footage of him saying how they've infiltrated the cabinets of many Western governments around the world. And so that is a real issue. So many politicians are now in on it and actually believe in it. They actually believe that we should have this great reset. And look, the great reset, I think in some ways, it's coming. It just it's going to come down to what is it really going to be? What's it going to look like? Because, you know, some people will say, yeah, we probably do need a reset. You know, the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. There's all sorts of things going on. Yeah, we do need a reset. And that's why what these guys are doing in Davos has a lot of appeal, because they couch it in all sorts of language like equality and climate change and all these sort of woke ideology that they're promoting. And they couch it in those terms, which is very appealing to certainly younger generations and to certain demographics of the population. So that appeal, and a lot of people have this appeal to socialism, which is what these guys are doing. It's ultimately creating a socialist society. Now, socialists has failed everywhere. You'd think as a human society we would have given up on it by now, but we haven't. And there are people out there, particularly people in positions of extreme power and influence, who really want to enforce it upon the whole world. And that's what we're seeing come through now. But the thing is, how are they going to achieve it? Well, there's only one way they can achieve it. People aren't going to give up their homes, right? There can be people protesting in the streets. I've already seen that in Holland. They're going to do it by crisis. You need crisis. You need economic catastrophe. You need climate catastrophe. You need all these things to occur in order to bring it about. You know, and COVID was a fantastic opportunity. Here you had this virus that, you know, we pretty much know leaked from a lab. And so most likely it was deliberate, and it's caused havoc around the world and thousands of deaths and millions of deaths. And it's now having this huge economic effect, you know, supply chain issues and all sorts of stuff. So these people need a crisis in order to achieve their goals, and that's what they're going to keep doing. You know, we're going to see more and more crises over the next couple of years as these people try and execute on their goals. And so that's when we have to think about, you know, what's a Christian response to all of this. You know, in effect, what they're trying to do is crash the system. That's how they're going to get control over it. As I say, no one's going to give up their house. But let's say you own a house and it's worth, I don't know, $1 million today, and you owe $700,000 on your $1 million house. You're not going to feel very comfortable though if the house halves in value. It's now worth $500,000 and you still owe $700,000. Maybe then you would be willing to give up your house, because you know you're going to be enslaved with your $700,000 at really high interest rate. You're going to be enslaved potentially for the rest of your working life. So maybe you would want to give it up. As I say, they're going to execute financial crises to bring this about. That's the absolute intention, and it's very clear now what they're going to do. So here's the thing, what's the Christian perspective on all this? You know, given these things that are going on around the world, and as Christians we need to be very concerned with what enables human flourishing. You know, when I think of politics and who I'm going to vote for and so forth, I look through the prism and say, well, what policies are going to enable people to do well, to people to flourish in life and to fulfill the calling that God has on their lives? And that to me is a critical way of looking at any economic or political policies that are getting passed. We want things that are going to enable people to flourish. And so it's no secret the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. In fact, let me read to you an important verse that I think really deals with this issue. It says, when the righteous thrive, the people rejoice. When the wicked rule, the people groan. That's from Proverbs 29, verse 2. And that's the situation here now. We've got a lot of wicked people in charge, a lot of people bringing very anti-Christ legislation. You're seeing that with the horrible abortion laws that are going around the world. A lot of late-term abortion laws got passed during COVID, certainly in Australia and New Zealand, and indeed other parts of the world. So there's and euthanasia getting passed everywhere. So there's all these death death policies, if you like, getting passed. So the world now is very much in the hands of many wicked people. That's not to say that there's not good people in politics. There are people out there who are fighting back against this system, but there's certainly a lot of evil going on through legislatures around the world. So the question is, well, what do we do about it then? So I want to offer some ways of thinking about it. As Christians, what we need to do is reassess our own lives, because the reality is many of us have been caught up in the materialism that's gone on in the Western world, and we have forgotten our first love, and we haven't prioritised God's kingdom as number one. My view is all of us have an assignment, we all have a purpose in life, a calling, if you like, that we need to fulfill, and we need to focus on that sharply. Life is breathtakingly short, and we need to make sure that we are doing everything we can to live out that calling, because that's what matters. Much more important than building wealth and all these other things that people think about, and all these short-term things. You know, materialism is very, very empty. Once you get all the stuff, you want more, and you're never ever satisfied, okay? So we need to get back on track and focusing on what's truly important, which is building God's kingdom. And of course, the danger, when we talk about the World Economic Forum, we talk about the Great Reset and all these things, there is a real risk that we focus too much on what the devil is doing. We focus on evil. No, we should be focusing on what God is doing to build his church, and what is God doing through us as believers, and what he wants us to do both individually and collectively to build his kingdom. So we need to focus on offense, getting out there and fulfilling what God has us to do, rather than just worrying about what all these, what a few crazy rich billionaires want to do and what their plans are to enslave humanity, okay? It's not to say you shouldn't be aware of them, you need to be aware and awake, because there are things you may need to do to counteract what these people have in mind for us and as people. We also need to change the way we think. We need to move back to a very free market system. What's happened in the Western world, particularly over the last 30 years, is getting more and more controlled, more and more regulated, and more this top-down control and intervention. We need to move back to a free market system. And the thing I'd challenge to you is think about your industry that you work in, and think about, what can I do to make my industry better? What can I do? What is God wanting me to do to be the light in the industry that I'm in? What can I do to make it better? Rather than criticising it and so forth, we need to engage with the world and offer a better way. Because as Christians, we have a better way. We read about how we should live and act according to God's word. We need to go out into the marketplace, wherever God's put us, whether it's in a school or whether it's in a business, and we've got to go out there and fulfil that role and responsibility that God has given us. And so as the world gets darker, which it is certainly getting darker rapidly at the moment, it's an opportunity for Christians to shine. The light will get brighter. I do think there's a fantastic opportunity for us to shine during these more challenging times going forward. The other thing is we've got to stop demanding things from the government. Whenever something goes wrong, whenever tough times come, everyone demands, do something, buy this, bail out this, etc. There's this constant interventionist attitude. We should not be looking to the government. The government should be looking to us. Okay, we should be the ones coming up with the solutions with society's problems. That's the role of a Christian. We've got to help people, lift people out of poverty. We've got to help people to flourish. Forget the government. They do a horrible job at it. It's our job and our responsibility to do it. We want to support government and honour them as much as we can. Obviously, we're not fully aligned with all the values of our governments, but we certainly want to help them, and we want to help create a society where God's kingdom gets built and that operates under kingdom principles. That, to me, is a fantastic opportunity for us. So yes, there are some dangers. This great reset and what these people have in mind is dangerous. Ultimately, as I say, they're going to be causing more and more crises around the world. They've got crazy plans. If you look up transhumanism, that's one of their key things, the fourth industrial revolution. You'll hear terms like that. But basically, this idea that we're going to move into this sort of socialist nirvana they have in mind, centralised control has never worked. The only sort of centralised control is a kingdom structure with God as king. That's the structure that does work, but not this man-made structure with a couple of elites telling us how we can all live. It's not going to work. And so yes, challenging times are coming. That I can guarantee you. But there is, as I say, there's great opportunity amongst all this madness that's going on. So what should Christians do? Well, first thing, focus on your calling. What is it that God has for you specifically to do? The other thing is get out of debt, because one thing they want to do is they want to enslave you. Okay, so you've got to get out of debt and not be so dependent on the economic system. Don't use credit cards, use cash. Okay, and yes, you have to use electronic stuff from time to time, but don't borrow money if you can avoid it, okay? Now, some businesses need debt, so I'm not saying that debt is wrong, but merely say you've got to think very, very carefully about how you use it and should try and minimise your debt so you don't get enslaved by it. We also want to have that kingdom mindset. We want to start thinking more about eternity. Now, I'm not suggesting you think about your death, right? We're here to make a difference, to build God's kingdom, and we need to have that as our focus with our daily lives. Too many Christians are too much focused on worldly things. You know, in our financial planning business, we talked about retirement. Now, but a lot of the messages I hear from clients are really just worldly messages. It's basically get to retirement, go on holiday, and see your family. Okay, they're nice things to do, but that's not why you're here. You're here to fulfill a particular purpose that God has for you. In fact, I don't even believe in retirement, because you don't retire from your calling. Now, yes, you may retire from paid work. Maybe you're in a physical job that is too demanding. So many of us will cease employment from paid employment. That's not a problem, but you never cease doing your calling. And so now is the chance, with all these strange things going on around us, talk about Great Reset, to get on with the mission that God has for you. So I hope that's been helpful, give you a bit of insight, some of the craziness going on around the world, but also look at the opportunities and the great things that God has planned for us and for his people, both now and in eternity. Thanks for watching. God bless.